Do you have a lisp?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It's news.
I came with it.
Okay. Well, I'll look into the. I'll look into
the de-lisper.
Yeah. Well, it hasn't worked against you too much.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. I have no problem with it.
And
it's identifiable.
And the charm can compensate for a heck of a lot.
Exactly.
I find.
Yeah, you try. The story is all about charm, isn't it?
This particular film, you mean?
Yeah.
That too. Yeah, that's very true. It is a lot of it, because I don't know how you get as far as you do without having some sort of hat trick or something. Well, this podcast, I just talked to almost anybody. I would even say just the film world, but sometimes I even dip outside of that. But generally, almost everybody has some sort of association with the film industry on some sort. Other than that, I don't really care, as long as it's somebody I'm interested in talking to. And I've been interested in talking to you for a really long time, actually. So I'm really glad they were finally able to get to sit together.
Yeah, great.
I've been watching your film since American Movie.
Oh wow. Okay.
And I saw you. I meant to make my way over to you at one of the Cinema Eye things.
Oh yeah. I went
maybe
to
last year or the year before.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago.
Okay, yeah. I was like, "Who's that?" There seems to be a buzz around this guy. It must have been after the last one too. It was it?
I don't know. Jim and Andy was the last one.
Jim and Andy. Yeah. Had to be that.
Probably
because you were probably out doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I was.
And that was really great too. Wow, that was a great documentary. Before we jump into Fyre, the greatest party that never happened, your new documentary. It's a Netflix documentary, Netflix original, and we'll be premiering, just so we get this, we don't bury the lead. What day do you know? Or
November 18th.
Thank you.
Or sorry.
What, say February 18th.
January
18th. That makes much more sense.
Yeah.
In fact, that's days away. So this will, let me think.
This will be out on Friday.
Huh. Wondering. Usually I would post after it's available already. That way people can go from the podcast right to watch it.
Right.
But I post on Thursdays. So I have two things. One, I guess I could
can't you just say tonight at midnight?
Yeah. I think it's the way to go. I think with this film in particular, I think it's the subject matter is going to be
timely.
So... Yeah. Why wait a week?
I agree.
I had planned it for this week. And then also... I think people with documentaries will know you and know your work, and I think that'll be fine.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So I did want to know how you arrive at the projects that you're going to work on. I mean, I guess that's not that untypical a question, but the Jim and Andy thing, it's so...
that was unusual because that came through Spike Jonze and Danny Goodbye and at Vice. They had been in touch with Jim Carrey, and they had been talking, and they thought there was a movie there, and so they came to me and said, is this something you'd be interested in? So that was...
So you were approached.
Yeah, I was.
That's not typical. Okay.
That's atypical.
Mm-hmm.
Usually I'm sort of just following some sort of instinct to stories that, are intriguing to me.
Mm-hmm.
And, they all seem to make sense on a like a gut level, but I don't always know. They all always take different shapes and forms.
Yeah, right. And I guess starting with something like American Movie, you probably just didn't know what you were going to be getting into at all.
Well, I started that as like a short film because I was I had made my first feature, which was a narrative, and it went to Sundance, and I had gotten back, and I remember distinctly feeling like 6 months had gone by and I hadn't been filming anything, and so it was this attempt to just sort of stay, be making something. And so I was writing another narrative film at the time, and planned to only make narrative films. And this was really just like a short film that I was gonna document this guy going to the Toronto Film Festival.
And how did you meet him?
I met Mark because I was Mark Borchardt, who's the subject of American Movie, was editing his film in the basement of this film building in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I was there editing my first feature.
I see.
At the same time.
Okay. And did you get some sort? Well, since you only had one feature, right? As you were editing that, and then you had this what was supposed to be a short to kind of just keep yourself out there and keep yourself. busy in documentary.
Yeah.
So this was going to be a short film, you said, American movie.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I never assumed it would be anything more than that, but it became very clear very quickly that, you know, this was far more interesting than the narrative script that I was trying to write.
Mhm.
And so I very quickly shifted focus to sort of following this story.
Did anything ever happen with the narrative?
No. I mean, it was, you know, I was 25 and,
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
you're lacking some, you know, not everyone, but I felt at the time I just didn't have the maturity to, you know, I had done one film that I was proud of. That was called American Job, and it was a narrative, but you know, that was very much me, sort of, you know, writing a narrative about the world that I knew very well, which was working minimum wage jobs. So like there was an element of truth in that I think worked really well in that film. And then I think from there, you know, you go to Sundance and you come back and you're like, what's your next narrative feature? And I think it was, you know, the idea was being born out of the idea of like I had to make another film as opposed to I have a story to tell. And that was, you know,
Yes.
a mistake that I made at a young age. And so that's, you know, really why I think I moved over to making the documentary, because it was very real, it was very tangible, and you know, it seemed like a great story.
So wow, so you actually got along with what turned out to be sort of like, if I can, a modern day classic of a documentary, if I may. You also got a big lesson in a way that really helped you navigate your career, because now you realize, oh, this, and documentaries kind of, if you're doing them right, it seems like, you know, it's much more of an unpredictable and organic kind of thing that happens, and you don't know the outcome. It's a little different here with Fyre, because you do.
Right. Yes and no, but I mean, going into it, I didn't know the story, and I didn't know what we would find, and ultimately didn't know, you know, what footage existed, and that was the real surprise, and the thing that sort of really opened it up.
I don't want to make any spoilers.
Okay.
I mean, well, you know, as far as just the chain of events, the chronology of events, that's public information. But just even what you can anticipate when you go into, or when you stream this film in a few days, it seems it's like the amount of footage was uncanny. I mean, it was just unbelievable. For somebody who, we're talking about now Billy McFarland, and who is you know, he's a scam artist, essentially, right? Is that fair to say?
He's a complicated individual.
Okay. I don't want to offend anybody.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things he does. The sort of psychological motivations and everything else behind that owes only can, I guess, is what maybe where you're coming from, is that it only behooves you to kind of open yourself up to that information and his background, because you get much more out of that experience than if you just write him off as this one foul type of thing.
Right.
Is that what you're kind of feeling?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that he is more than that one thing. I think he's you know, a complex individual that, you know, I think ultimately, you know, he wanted to be a success. He wanted to pull off this festival. He wanted to be at the center of that world. I think those things are pretty evident in sort of the way he, you know, was proceeding. He just got in, you know, over his head, and then, you know, had to react. In my mind, it felt like he had to make, you know, decisions to do anything that he could to try to pull off, you know, to pull off the festival.
Right, which it did, which of course included just misleading people.
Yeah.
To you know, and
I mean, we didn't talk to him directly, but I would assume that he felt like, you know, the ends justified the means, and so like, you know, everyone was going to lose everything if he didn't pull the festival off, because that, you know, ultimately would be the asset that could hopefully, you know, turn things around. And so this is speculation, but you know, I can only imagine that he must have felt like, I have to do anything possible to pull this off, because otherwise it all implodes.
Do you think
the irony is that it imploded anyways?
Right. It is complicated, because I mean, imagine other people. You're really speaking for him in that way, because other people could have just said that, you know, if if he had any point, they would would have preferred any one of the folks that signed up with him to launch this festival, right? Which was a kind of an elite music, festival experience, destination experience, and that any one of those employees would have much more preferred to just pull the plugs, when it was clear that they were way in over their heads, right? So
and I think a number of them expressed the desire to try to pull the plug, and it was, it didn't. There was basically like, we're a solutions focused organization, and if you don't want to participate, then you should move on. So I think that it was very much. Billy sort of always is pushing things forward. And I think, ultimately the reason was it's like he didn't have any choice.
Mm-hmm. In his mind.
In his mind, yes.
Yeah. It's interesting because you mentioned before, like, you didn't know, like, you didn't have direct access. You had the same footage we see in the film, right? So, right. And there was an amazing amount. Yeah. Like, people were shooting. That's
what's interesting is that there's, with everyone having like an iPhone, you have the ability to record the world around you. And yes, there were some bigger, libraries of footage that we were able to get. Some from the promotional shoot that they had done, and some from like Jerry Media, who had been doing like a daily vlog and just happened to be working with Fyre. So those were like, there was that grouping of footage. But then there was also, an artist named Kindo, who had been, was documenting himself when he was working with Magnesis, and later with, had footage of Billy when he was out on bail. So, it was really sort of pulling, it was this archaeological experiment where we were sort of, looking in every corner to try to find anything we could to try to piece together this story, so that, ultimately my goal was to try to create something that you felt like you were there. Even though we weren't there filming, we tried to collect as much footage so that the experience felt immersive, as opposed to something that was looking back.
Yeah. The experience was definitely as immersive as if some documentary filmmaker was just following them the entire time, shooting a film for this purpose of just telling a story about this festival.
And that, I have to give credit to Matt Projects, who had shot the promotional video but was also shooting the documentary footage. And they had a director on specifically for this purpose. So, that was a huge part of, I think, bringing this world to life.
Sure. So the promotional thing, the promotional part was that a group went down to this location in the Bahamas with a bunch of supermodels who all sadly forgot their wardrobes. Apparently, some problem with the plane or something, where then none of them, their baggages apparently didn't make it to there, right? Because
none of them had actual festival.
Well, no, to the promotional time or ahead of time. None of the models had clothing. I'm just joking around.
I understand.
Sorry. They were all in bathing suits. But the thing is, so that promotion, that was the idea, was to do this, bring them all down there and just shoot something, right?
Yeah.
In anticipation of the...
Well, the idea was to showcase this luxury festival experience. So it was, white sand beaches and private planes and, models in swimsuits and,
they knew that wasn't going to be there at the festival necessarily so much as...
I think that they did hope that they could achieve something that gave, that was similar to that. I think once they got into the logistics, they realized that was very difficult to achieve. And I think that's where a lot of the people, claim that this was fraud, because they realized at some point along the way that what they advertised, what they were going to deliver was nowhere close to what they were advertising. And that's, the basis of a lot of the lawsuits.
But I guess I was getting to, so the guy that was leading that promotional video, documentary, or promotional piece, that guy turned over the footage to you, correct? So you could use it for your film Fyre, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then there was another director, you're saying that was...
There was a director that had been shooting the documentary footage, yeah.
Oh, that team hired.
Yeah, the team
And
hired.
then he went beyond that, though. He was shooting other things as well that weren't part of that
Well,
promotional...
there was different people had been shooting different things, so there was all,
But you got all their...
we got a lot of it, yeah.
How did you do that?
It was a lot of work. It was a lot of people, a lot of, this movie more than anything else were a lot of meetings and trying to get people on board, not only to give over footage, but also to just even do interviews and talk. You know, a lot of people I think were, apprehensive about having any association with Fyre because, when it had imploded, it had a definite negative stigma, to it.
And the sooner they, right?
Yeah.
The sooner as they detach from that, the better. Right,
Correct.
I mean, not to keep hold of it through another documentary that's going to get that's going to be on Netflix, whereas millions of people may see it.
Correct.
And then they're prolonging their association with Billy, with Fyre.
Yes.
So, but you were persuaded, nevertheless. Was there any motivation for them to Well, it was an opportunity also, not just to. There was that, as we just said, this prolonging this association, but there was also an opportunity to tell their side. Maybe in their minds to clear their names to some degree, if not completely. Right, for those guys at the
this definitely could have been a motivation for a lot of people. I felt like in most cases, people just, after doing the interview, it felt like it was a very cathartic process, And I remember Mark Mustard said to me, "It's like the story had to be told, and they just were looking for the right steward, And
okay.
Many of the contractors had sort of banded together, and when I finally filmed with Mark Weinstein, I think he sort of put in a good word for me because he had just seen Jim and Andy with the others and just said, I think this is the right person to tell the story.
So right, you didn't come in obviously with an agenda, even as you talk about Billy and everything. It seems like you're really make a point of staying as fair and neutral.
Attempting to stay, yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And there's another question. Billy McFarland. People refer to him, whether it was during this period of time or maybe, it doesn't matter. Let me just rephrase. Just people that have worked with him or for him will constantly refer to this guy who's charismatic and incredibly persuasive, etc. Yet in the footage, it's ironic. Normally he's very hard to get a sense of him. He doesn't seem to make that much eye contact, at least with the footage that's in your documentary. I don't see the contact. I don't see him really engaging people that much,
which is what's confusing because everyone that talks about him in the movie talks about how charismatic he was and how he could draw anyone in and how great he was at selling the dream.
Right.
And so that was one of the things that was, I felt like was hard to convey in the movie because I don't think it's fully evident in the material, but it was from time and time again. It was people were telling stories of Billy's ability to sort of he had this magical quality over people. Yeah.
Well, I mean, who's the guy? Maybe you mentioned him just now before when you said you're bringing up some of the guys that were kind of acting as liaison between you and these guys. But
Nick Perzicki, who was with Jerry Media, had worked with Fyre. He was, one of the agencies that they had contacted to help run the social media feed, and then there was Matt Projects. But Mick was instrumental in sort of making introductions to a lot of the key, Fyre team.
Mm-hmm. Who was the guy in the film though? That was his sort of the older guy, middle-aged
Andy
guy.
King.
Andy King, right? Yeah. Who went as far as literally, he said he was ready to perform a sexual act.
Yes.
On one of their accounts, essentially. The guys that were bringing in the planes, or I can't remember exactly, or the water and the supplies and stuff, right?
Yeah.
I'm doing a poor job. I apologize, but I believed him. I mean, I believed that he really was.
Him. I mean, you couldn't make something like that up.
Is it possible that Billy also, maybe the talent is just in finding people that want to believe in him and want to believe in or hungry for someone to bring them into it?
I think that there's a lot of people looking. I remember Mark Borchardt in American Movies said, he's like, people are looking for destinies, and giving them to them. So like, so I think that you'll find with any sort of charismatic person who's pushing forward on some crazy adventure, that whether it's making a movie or making a music festival in the Bahamas, that there's a group of people that you can enlist. And in Fyre, it was probably easier than an independent film because they were also paying people, or there was the promise of getting paid.
Mm-hmm. And obviously they're not getting paid, not making any money off this project.
Who?
Anybody in the film, right? Or
it's different people. We had licensed footage from different people, so there
you did have to license.
Yeah, we did have to license.
So it makes sense.
Footage.
That's typical. That's typical. What was their response to the film, to your final film? Did you do a screening for them, or how did you do that? How did that work out?
Yeah, we did a screening last night with most of the people that were in the movie, and it went great.
Really?
I got many. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a difficult movie to for the participants to relive that experience was probably challenging.
Sure.
But ultimately, we had an event after, and everyone stayed around, and it's a great group of people. That was one of the things that I was most surprised about getting into this project was how many, incredible, hardworking, conscientious people that surrounded Fyre and that were brought into Fyre. I had no idea, what I was going to encounter, and I thought, if this is all sort of these sort of yahoos or whatever, that tried to put on this festival and just sort of didn't, care. Like, it would prove to be a challenging film to make because I just didn't want to make something that was making fun of everyone. It just doesn't seem to me worth spending a year on a movie that's skewering or ridiculing people. To me, I was trying to find the human story. What is the angle? What is how can an audience relate and understand the decisions that were made? That culminated in this sort of implosion.
Mm-hmm. I just remember when back in 2017, when this story was unfolding and it started making the news and what have you and I just remembered the sense of feasting on blood, just like you wanted them to pay and to get caught it was one of those stories where you just what knee-jerk reaction was there's just a bunch of elitist, arrogant types of guys, and there's no doubt that some of this context is because of what we're going through as a country right now with living in this right now with this president and all the just the unabashed lying that we're facing every day. Within that context,
right,
it seemed all the more like a great opportunity to see somebody like that go down. At least, that was the leap I made. This, right. Where Billy McFarland becomes the scapegoat in that way. Do you have any feeling about the context of showing this film at this particular time in our lives?
I think there's obvious parallels. I tried not to make them because it felt too obvious.
On the nose?
Yeah, it felt too on the nose. I felt like anyone that couldn't see a connection to the current political situation, I mean, it just seemed ridiculous to have to spell that out. I thought it was... What? I thought it was insulting to the viewer. No, I'm just saying, I don't mind having a dialogue about it. I don't mind talking about it in a podcast. But to put it in a movie where, to me, it's so...
See?
Yes, it's like... I mean, I at least... I feel like I have more respect for the audience.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. But, we've been in some points over this type of thing has happened before, and over
and
the years.
And it will happen again.
And it will happen again.
I mean, to think this is unique to this time is the delivery mechanism and sort of the way that things unfolded was very much, a reflection of sort of the way we communicate through phones right now and influencers and influencer culture. That's, a fact. But in terms of, the actual story, it's a very human story, and it's very one that's been, has existed before and will continue.
It's almost in a way you're presenting it like a procedural. Was that how you had it in mind?
I didn't have anything in mind going into it. To me, it was collecting all the information and trying to make something that was reflective of what we saw to be the truth. And that was, the goal with any of these things. It's obviously all subjective because you're choosing what to put in and what to leave out. But that's at least the goal. And I had a great team of editors that, we worked tirelessly to try to, make something that felt accurate in terms of its, depiction of events.
Mm-hmm. You're doing a project like this, I could see would be a challenge for somebody who, it's not a verite type of project. Obviously, it's all found footage, but it's, you also, it sounds like you really are trying to avoid a didactic kind of approach, which, it's
I
like this.
When
you
people when something tells you what to think.
Well, sure, yeah.
I mean, it's like I feel like I like to present scenarios and let the audience come to their own conclusion. People say, "What does this movie say? What is this movie about?" And I always say, like, ultimately, I want the movie to open up a discourse and a dialogue, so that when people leave the theater or finish a movie, that there's a discussion that happens, and that everyone has their own viewpoint, and they can sort of bring that to the table, and that that's what's most exciting and intriguing to me, rather than making it so pointed to say that this is the only singular interpretation that could be made. That said, there's a lot of there are a lot of statements that were made in the movie that support the thesis that we believed was reflective of this story. So one of the interview subjects says, this was Instagram brought to life, and it was about exclusivity and access, and I believe that to be true. I thought that was it's maybe it's an obvious observation, but it was one that felt it was eloquently spoken and summed up that idea, I think, really well. You have Mark Weinstein at the end is talking about one day we will he wouldn't be surprised to hear if there's some other thing that happens down the line, and behind it would be Billy McFarland, and that I also think could happen. So there's I think that a lot of that comes from the people in the movie, and that's sort of a reflection of how you think about these things. But at the same time, I tried to keep it at a healthy balance, so that it's not limiting your ability to sort of bring your own thoughts to a film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have any idea what Billy thinks about the project? Or I assume he hasn't seen it.
Idea. I don't think so, because he's in prison. But
right.
I don't know. I keep asking everyone. Do they have Netflix in prison? I don't know.
It's a special version of Netflix.
I mean, it's a good question, though. I mean,
I'm sure they don't.
I don't know. What?
Yeah, no, and I just wonder, if there's a pipeline. Did you have access to correspond or to communicate with him?
No, we tried. I don't know if I mentioned that, but we tried to film with him, and
okay.
And then he ultimately, wanted to get paid, and we didn't feel like it was fair for him to benefit when so many other people had been hurt, by what he had done. So
right.
We didn't engage in that way.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But we did try to work something out with him. We did make an effort.
Mm-hmm.
It just, in the end, that was the impasse.
So in addition to whatever prison time he's serving, he also just still has major debts. I believe that in the SEC document that came out, it said something like $27.4 million. And then there was someone in the film that filed a lawsuit that him and his friend both received a judgment of $5 million against Billy. So, but I believe they're in line after the $27.4 million. Mm. But oddly enough, it's like he could make it back. Yeah. That's what's crazy is that if I was going to bet on anyone, I would bet on him. One way or another. Well, the postscript.
I would not be surprised if he's successful.
I'm not going to say much more except for vaguely say that toward the end when he's on bail, that whole section of the film, what goes on there, and this maybe is a good kind of tantalizing way of get people to see it, shows that's great evidence of what you're just saying, because he didn't miss a step.
No. He was right back in it.
Yeah. And I guess that's the part where I felt like why I said that kind of harsh. I don't think it's harsh, but maybe it sounded harsh in the, objectively speaking. But that to call him a scam artist, because that just to being able to make the decisions and choices that he was making,
right?
Now, I understand there was a great imperative to somehow figure out financially what to do, and he was probably desperate.
Yeah.
So you don't make great choices when you're desperate. That I understand.
Yeah.
Even okay. But did you have any? Was there any diagnosis of this guy, by the way? Any that were? It's okay. You don't have to answer that.
I'll pass.
People will probably make their own.
Yes.
On their own, exactly, after seeing this film. Again, the name of the film is Fyre, The Greatest Party That Never Happened. It's going to be streaming on Netflix, so
yeah.
if you don't have a Netflix account.
Midnight tonight,
that's right. As we record this, it's a couple of days ahead, but as I post this on Thursday, this will be available Friday, January 18th. January 18th. And I really recommend everybody watch it. It's highly entertaining, and you'll be talking about it if this happens at the water cooler. I don't know. It's one of those films.
Definitely at the water cooler.
Just as a last thing, is it getting any theatricals?
Yeah, it's released in New York and LA.
It is, right? That's for consideration, I assume, and for meeting those requirements, so you can get considered for this nomination or that.
I think so.
Right. And but it's played in front of audiences just at festivals, at a few festivals.
Actually,
did you do any?
More just with small screenings that we've done.
Okay.
So we did a premiere and we did a screening in LA last week.
Yeah, you didn't do the festival circuit this time around, right?
Not this time.
Yeah, interesting. So it's interesting because you're almost not having that theater experience altogether. But maybe you'll do some Q&As and
here and there.
And if it does these theatrical, I didn't know if you were going to go to those.
Yeah, I'll go. There's a BAFTA screening tonight, so I'm going to go to that.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
All right. It'd be interesting to get those.
Yeah, it's nice to talk after, and I don't know. It just it provides closure for the film for me.
Right.
The same way that I think doing this interview for a lot of the people involved gave them closure.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's interesting because the reaction you get immediately following the film is going to be very particular.
Yeah.
Than like I saw the film maybe 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I think with some time and coming off of it and being able to digest it and let it marinate, it really has an impact on how you feel about it when you're having those conversations. Well, thank you. I hope we can do this again, maybe with another project I'd like to do. Anyway.
Sounds great.
Okay.
I'm around.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
All right.